America's fastest-growing news program. With Steve Gruber.
You've got to put America first. You do that by voting and bringing your friends to do the same.
Delivering the latest news, observations, and opinions. With the entire Real America's Voice team, America's Voice Live starts now.
Welcome to America's Voice Live. I'm Steve Gruber. Today is Thursday, July 13th, 2023. Let's get to today's top stories, and thank you for joining me here on a Thursday. The House, considering a series of amendments proposed by conservatives to tack onto the National Defense Bill. We'll discuss the drama with Congressman Ralph Norman of South Carolina. Meanwhile, two Biden whistleblowers are set to testify before Congress on their accusations against the Department of Justice as the walls continue to close in on Hunter Biden. And later, a trans-identified person says he wants to be the first to receive a uterus, not to give life, but to take it. We'll discuss that with Pastor Lucas Miles. What's wrong with people? They're twisted. These stories and more coming up on America's Voice Live today. Stick around for all of it. Now we start here. FBI Director Christopher Wray testified in front of the House Oversight Committee yesterday. I'm sure you've seen some of the clips already. I'm going to break it all down for you here today because nothing about it looked good. Nothing. You had Democrats slobbering all over Christopher Wray, saying what a fine job he and his FBI have been doing, going after their political opponents for them. But when it came time for Republicans to speak and ask questions, Wray just couldn't give any straight answers, nothing about anything at all. It's funny that the leaders of these three-letter agencies suddenly don't know anything when faced with important questions. Makes you wonder, what do they do all day? And of course, that leads to a couple of big problems. One, is they really don't know. And if they don't, then the deep state is far bigger than we ever guessed, but I'm not buying that one. And if they do know and are lying or are operating with plausible deniability built into their jobs, i.e., telling their minions that there's things that they just don't want to know, well, that's clearly much worse. But before I dive into all of that, let's revisit a Hunter Biden email that recently resurfaced regarding Burisma, the energy company that Hunter Biden served on the board because he knows so much about energy, apparently. In an email from 2015, it details Burisma and Hunter Biden's efforts to get ahead of any investigations into the company and its founder, Mykola Zlochevsky. Here's a portion of that email sent from a Burisma executive to Hunter Biden and his business associates, Devin Archer and Eric Schwerin. Let me read. My only concern is for us to be on the same page, re our final goals. With this in mind, I would like us to formulate a list of deliverables, including but not limited to a concrete course of actions, including meetings, communications, resulting in high-ranking U.S. officials in Ukraine, U.S. ambassador, and U.S. publicly, or in private communication comment expressing their positive opinion and support of Nikolai Burisma to the highest level of decision-makers here in Ukraine, President of Ukraine, President Chief of Staff, Prosecutor General, etc. The scope of work should also include organization of a visit of a number of widely recognized and influential current and or former U.S. policymakers to Ukraine in November, aiming to conduct meetings with and bring positive signal and message and support on Nikolai's issue to the Ukrainian top officials above with the ultimate purpose to close down for any cases or pursuits against Nikolai in Ukraine. There's your ultimate purpose, to impact Ukrainian policy using American political power. Now, Hunter Biden then suggested retaining the services of a lobbying group, Blue Star, which Burisma eventually did. This all came just 1 month before then Vice President Joe Biden traveled to Ukraine to demand that the investigator looking into Burisma be fired. And wouldn't you know it, the same lobbying firm, Blue Star, was reportedly on a conference call with the Obama administration just before the trip to Ukraine. Could the then vice president be one of those important U.S. officials the email was talking about, or is it just a coincidence? I think you can put this pretty simple puzzle together. And therein lies the problem with Christopher Wray and the FBI. If we can put all of this together, why can't they? I mean, they have multiple pieces of evidence that Hunter Biden was, at the very least, acting as an unregistered foreign agent, which is the same thing they have charged one of Hunter's whistleblowers with, who, by the way, worked with this very same company, China's CEFC. China, Ukraine, Russia, Romania, you get the idea. Hunter Biden also got paid by that Chinese company to the tune of millions of dollars, plus bonuses, of course. And Congressman Matt Gaetz asked Director Wray yesterday directly if he was trying to help the Bidens, reading that others smoking gun WhatsApp message of Hunter shaking down CEFC officials using his daddy. Listen to this.
I'm sitting here with my father. I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me and every person he knows and my ability to forever hold a grudge, that you will regret not following my direction. I am sitting here waiting for the call with my father. Sounds like a shakedown, doesn't it, Director?
I'm not going to get into commenting on that.
You seem deeply uncurious about it, don't you? Almost suspiciously uncurious. Are you protecting the Bidens?
Absolutely not. The FBI does not and has no interest in
you won't answer the question about whether or not that's a shakedown, and everybody knows why you won't answer it.
Ridiculously uninterested, isn't he? Yeah. Interesting that Wray doesn't weigh in on that message, as Matt Gaetz points out. He doesn't even suggest there's an ongoing investigation and can't. He simply says he doesn't want to. Then he says that the FBI isn't covering for Hunter and Joe Biden, but nobody actually believes that, because they've had years, literally years, to investigate Joe and Hunter, and all of this evidence coming out is not leaking from the FBI. It's leaking from Hunter's laptop. You know, the one the FBI's had since December of 2019. And members of Congress have found the documents. They've found the receipts, if you will. And so you mean to tell me the FBI couldn't or didn't find this information as well on that laptop they've had since December of 2019? Please. But Gaetz continued, this time pressing Wray on FISA queries regarding January the 6th, which Wray testified to earlier hadn't been going on, or at least he wasn't aware of it. Did he perjure himself when he said that? Well, you decide. Here it is.
There, Senator Lee's asking you whether or not FISA was in any way involved in your January 6th investigation, and you say no. Was that truthful?
I said that I did not believe it was.
Okay, so now let's pull up what the court said, which was something a little different than what you said. It says, the government has reported additional significant violations of the querying standard, including several relating to the January 6, 2021 breach of the Capitol. So I guess the question, Director Wray, is did you not know when you were answering these questions that the FBI was engaging in these illegal searches, or did you perjure yourself to Senator Lee?
I certainly didn't perjure myself at the...
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. At the time, Chris Wray, the head of the FBI, simply didn't know what was going on. He didn't know what was going on. Gaetz smelled blood in the water. He pressed on. Here's more.
Did you not know when you gave the untruthful answer before Senator Lee that this was going on?
It was a truthful answer. I did not believe FISA had been involved in the January 6th
But it was. So you didn't. The answer is the FBI has broken so bad that people can go and engage in queries that when you come before the Congress to answer questions, you're like blissfully ignorant. You're blissfully ignorant as to the unlawful queries. You're blissfully ignorant as to the Biden shakedown regime.
It's like I said earlier, do these people really not know what's going on? I find that hard to believe. Or do they not want to know exactly how things are being done? That's more likely. Or are they just straight up lying? Any of those answers is a problem. It's clear the FBI understands that oversight just doesn't apply to them, and they also know where the bread is buttered. It's not with the Republicans, but with the Democrats. And knowing that, do you think they will ever go after Democrats? I mean, seriously? This is an agency that is doing the dirty work of the president, trying to lock up his political opponent for the rest of his life over documents it seems that former President Donald Trump was allowed to have, or at the very least, something they've let other government officials off the hook for in the past. I see Hillary Clinton, Mike Pence, Joe Biden himself. I mean, all of these people. And how about Congressman Andy Biggs? He weighed in too, asking Director Wray if the FBI had confidential human sources and resources in the crowd on January the 6th. This is an important exchange as well. Listen.
That those who were there in an undercover capacity on January 6th, how many were there?
Again, I'm not sure that I can give you that number as I sit here. I'm not sure there were undercover agents on scene.
I find that kind of a remarkable statement, Director. At this point, you don't know whether there were undercover federal agents FBI agents in the crowd or in the Capitol on January 6th?
I say that because I want to be very careful. There have been a number of court filings related to some of these topics, and I want to make sure that I stick within what's in.
Does anybody believe any of that? I mean, come on. Oh, there could be court filings. I mean, wow. Maybe he should have said, I'm hiding behind the Hatch Act. That seems to be a common thing from the Biden administration. Why can't the FBI give a simple yes or no answer to that very simple question? They've been asked several times now, and they're unwilling to say either way. How does that imperil any of their investigation into January 6th at this point? Either you had people there working or you did not. Right? It's been 2.5 years. What about the FBI investigation of Catholics, basically as domestic terrorists? Jim Jordan was on Ray for that question. Here it is.
Doctor, what's the difference between a traditional Catholic and a radical traditional Catholic?
I'm not an expert on the Catholic orders.
Well, your FBI wrote a memo talking about radical traditional Catholics. I'm just wondering if you could define it for us.
Well, what I can tell you is you're referring to the Richmond product, which was a single product by a single field office, which as soon as I found out about it, I was aghast and ordered it withdrawn and removed from FBI systems.
You were aghast, then why won't you let us talk to the people who put it together?
We are working on finishing an internal review into what happened there.
We have to wait. We, the Congress, and the American people have to wait until you do an internal review. It's not a criminal investigation going on here.
He was aghast by it. But, Congress, no, you're not allowed per the FBI to interview anyone about it. You see, the FBI is doing their own internal review of the matter. It's all about smoke and mirrors and lies. Then Jim Jordan brought up that the FBI was looking to place agents inside these Catholic communities, perhaps even placing them as priests. Think about that. Jim Jordan did. Listen.
Let me just read from page 4. Provide new opportunities to mitigate extremist threat through outreach to traditional Catholic parishes and the development of sources with the placement and access to report on places of worship. That's pretty fancy language for they're trying to put informants in the parish, in the church. Do you think priests should be informants inside the church, Director?
We do not recruit, open, or operate confidential human sources to infiltrate, target, report.
But that's not what this said. It sounds like you were trying to do it in Richmond, Virginia.
This is not what the FBI was created for. It's going after their perceived political enemies, conservatives, people like you and me. It's clearly helping Democrats if they can. You only need to look at Hunter Biden and Joe Biden for proof of that. The corruption in America continues. The question is, how does it end? You know, here's how it should end. The FBI should be bulldozed into the trash heap of history, along with a bunch of other things, too, by the way. The Department of Justice, the Department of Education, the Environmental Protection Agency. It's time to start over around here. It's time to clean up the trash. And what you saw there was a whole lot of trash being spread around and burying the truth. We'll get to it. We will get to it because this corruption will come to an end. Hopefully, Republicans will man up. Yeah, I said it. Man up in 2024 and make some things happen. We'll have to wait and see, but it's what we need to look for. Coming up after the break, the House looking to take up a series of 80 or so amendments for the National Defense Authorization Act. Congressman Ralph Norman will join me next with details. This is America's Voice Live. Well, the U.S. Treasury has created over $1 trillion in new debt. Just 5 weeks. 5 weeks after the signing of the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023. Does that sound fiscally responsible to you? Contrary to expectations, the debt ceiling deal has not prevented default. It's accelerated it. This new debt will also be subject to an interest rate of over 5%, further compounding a debt of nearly $33 trillion, an increase of 50% in just 4 years. Personal credit card debt has surged to almost $1 trillion as well, an increase of over 15% since the pre-COVID days and more than triple the amount prior to the 2008 recession. These factors indicate a potential economic downturn, the inevitable consequences of a government that supports ideologically driven policy that leads to economic slowdowns, increased interest payments, and foreign debt holders, and the risk of fiscal crisis, a debt crisis. But you know that thing, Bidenomics. As I've been telling you, it'll end up being the worst branding effort since Bud Light. A recent report by the United Auto Workers highlights a provision in President Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, allowing automakers tax credits if their electric vehicles are primarily sourced in North America. Now, this effectively creates an industry-wide bailout for multinational corporations at the expense of you, the taxpayers, and, by the way, at the expense of auto workers. How do you think they like that? As much as $220 billion in subsidies could be distributed by 2031. $220 billion. The report highlights wage losses for American workers. A GM plant in Lordstown, Ohio closed in 2018. You know where those jobs went? Mexico. Yeah. Reopened in 2022 with wages cut from $32 an hour to just $16.50 an hour for the newly merged conglomerate between GM and LG, and will only allow for an increase to $20 an hour after 7 years. Yeah. Sounds like Ross Perot, doesn't it? That giant sucking sound you hear is jobs going to Mexico. There it goes. More than half of the workers quit the first year of low wages and poor working conditions. The report says, quote, public investments in the EV supply chain must come with standards that promote, not undermine, high-road domestic manufacturing. The UAW report points out that working with electric vehicle manufacturing poses health issues from toxic materials and proposed provisions for working with chemical hazards that will allow for greater protection than OSHA regulations. Quite a mess right now. New Yorkers, you've probably heard, feeling increasingly unsafe. A recent Siena College poll found 41% of New Yorkers are on edge for their personal safety. We have reverted to the 1970s. Premier Giuliani. When in the 1980s, the former mayor implemented broken window and stop and frisk policies to combat the high crime rate. Despite claims of decreased crime, locals say there are more mentally ill homeless and people openly using drugs in the streets, even in Midtown Manhattan. Those who have lived in the city for decades say it's different, much worse. The New York Post interviewed a few of those locals. Here's part of what they had to say. Listen.
I do feel safe. You have to be aware of your surroundings, any place that you work or commute at all times.
I've always felt reasonably safe in New York, but it definitely gives me more pause now than it used to. I hold my bag a little closer, make sure I hold my kids' hands. I'm always alert now, but I mean, it doesn't stop me from coming in when I need to.
I don't necessarily feel safe. Once it gets dark, I really don't go on the subway at all. I'll take a cab. Just it gets real seedy at nighttime.
I'm very nervous. I travel every day on the subway to go to work. I don't feel safe. I always feel like there's an incident every day, and it just doesn't make me feel comfortable.
Lawlessness, you see, is the result of politicians who think defunding the police will solve social justice problems. It doesn't, obviously, and it's not working clearly. Even with the new mayor, Eric Adams, who demands respect, it just doesn't work. How about respect the taxpayers? Respect the citizens of the great city of New York. All right. Democrat Governor Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan has issued an executive order creating the Department of Lifelong Education, Advancement, and Potential. Lifelong Education, Advancement, and Potential. LEAP, LEAP, to work with the Michigan Department of Education to facilitate programs in child care, after-school programming, and affordable education for adults. Whitmer said that kindergarten through 12th grade is not enough education, and kids need to start early toward paths of tuition-free higher education so adults can get high-skilled and in-demand jobs, and people without high-skilled in-demand jobs can pick up the bill. Michigan LEAP will have a cabinet director that will oversee three offices: the Office of Early Childhood Education, Higher Education, and Education Partnerships. The executive order sounds spectacular. It's endorsed by the Michigan Department of Education. Of course it is, but is it really spectacular? Well, scholastically, Michigan is in the bottom half, 27th in the nation. Michigan Senator Eric Nesbitt tweeted this: "Call me old-fashioned, but maybe we should focus more on kids learning to read and promoting education accountability rather than expanding the bloated bureaucracy." I'll end with this. Every government bureau sounds good, but they're the only thing that lives on forever and always exceeds taxpayer expectations. Always exceeds, in price, that is. Today, the House is looking to take up a series of 80 or so amendments for the National Defense Authorization Act, which includes proposals on Ukraine funding, changes to the Pentagon's abortion policy, and a whole lot more. Democrats have called the so-called amendments poison pills that could stall the $886 billion defense bill. All right. Well, today the House is looking to take up a series of about 80 amendments or so for the National Defense Authorization Act, which would include proposals on Ukraine funding, changes to the Pentagon's abortion policy, and a lot more. Democrats have called the so-called amendments poison pills that could stall the $886 billion defense bill. Join me live to discuss. Congressman Ralph Norman. Congressman, good to see you again.
Great to be with you, Steve.
I always appreciate your common sense point of view. Look, they're poison pills. Okay, maybe we need a couple of those in Washington these days. Maybe we need something to just stop this process of endlessly fleecing the taxpayers. But call me old-fashioned. But maybe we're just spending too much, and it's time to slam on the brakes, at least on something. Where do you want to begin?
Well, you know, Steve, I just got off the House floor debating having to put up an amendment that cut taxpayers' dollars for getting surgery for those men who wanted to be a woman and vice versa. You know, who would have thought in America we'd even be taking this up? In the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, charged with defending America, while China is building ships, while China is building airplanes, while China is using it for taking over other countries. Here we are debating this. We're a laughing stock.
You mean you don't think China's practicing their pronouns today?
You know, I don't think that's at the top of the agenda. And if it was, you would disappear in China. So it's, you know, it's amazing that we're even having to do this, but it is what it is. And we got to fight for it. The good news is we had over 1,500 amendments. For your listeners under Pelosi, you couldn't offer an amendment. And what we offered and what we were ruled in order last night at 2:30 in the morning, we got a lot of amendments that we took out, the transgender, just what I mentioned, surgery using taxpayers' dollars. We took out so many other things, woke spending that has nothing to do with our military. And you know, as Matt Rosendale said, do you really want a man trying to decide if he's a man or woman to go fight for you in the war and have your hand on the nuclear weapon? I mean, it's insane. But I think we'll pass it tonight, and I think we'll end up with a good bill, and we'll see how it turns out.
I guess you're more optimistic than I am. I also want to know about this repeal of a provision that's been there for decades that would allow the United States government now to promote propaganda to American citizens. That's never been allowed. I think it's from the 1940s. It's been discussed in the National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA. Do you know about that? What's that about? Why are we concerning ourselves with all these different things that don't seem to have to do with protecting our country?
Well, we shouldn't have to. We should not have to defend it. That's how, since the Biden administration has come in, given intelligence to other countries, he's undermining America, and we shouldn't have to be voting on it. So many of these items we shouldn't. But like funding abortions in the military, you know, and it shouldn't be, but we're having to. I mean, they're bringing the fight to us, and we're facing it, but it's an insult. And the Biden administration has sided with China. I mean, it's pure and simple. And, you know, that's just one of the things. I mean, the American people, if they saw what went on behind the scenes and the actual language in some of these things that this administration was trying to do, a lot of it through executive order, but a lot of it just using vague language to accomplish their intent, which I think is to basically disarm this country. We're just not going to let that happen.
Well, here's something else that's popped up, and it kind of runs parallel to what we're talking about here. The military, for the last year, or maybe a little more now, failing to meet its recruiting goals and missing them massively. And now I've just read, and this is shocking to me, I can't believe this is in America either, Ralph, and that is 70% of the young people in this country are not physically qualified to be in the U.S. military. What in the world has gone on?
Well, it's like it's like everything else. You take freedom for granted. You take health for granted. A lot of the military is down 35% or more in recruitment. Now, a lot of it was because of forced retirement through the COVID vaccine. The government telling those brave men and women who protect our country they had to take a shot. And not only were they cutting their pay, they were stripping them of their rank. That's a lot of it. And a lot of people are just sick and tired of what's going on. And, you know, our founders would be horrified that we're letting a country like America, who's been the strongest, who's protected the weakest, to go by the wayside. And that's what's happening, and that's what we're trying to prevent.
And I want to ask you one more thing, because every time I see Joe Biden on the national stage lately, somebody has to play seeing eye dog for him, leading off the stage. Oh, you got to go this way. Somebody latches onto him. He gets herded around because he's got, you know, that stiff. Look, I'm going to just call it for what it is. It's a dementia walk. That's what it is. He's old. He's senile, as we used to say in the old days. That's what it is. And I know this, Ralph, because you heard this the same as the rest of the world heard this. Oh, Ukraine's out of 155 millimeter howitzer ammunition. Oh, and by the way, we're running real low. Who on God's green earth, as the commander-in-chief, goes out and tells your enemies, oh, by the way, we're running out of ammunition? I mean, that is beyond reckless, isn't it?
The man cannot read a thank you note. The man cannot find his way off of a stage. The man couldn't define a missile, from a piece of grass. I mean, the man is totally out of it, and it's an embarrassment seeing him with world leaders who are on their game, who want to basically take over America and take over all the assets of this country. And we cannot. And we got a commander in chief who's telling the whole world that we can't produce different types of military. And it's not just planes. The cluster bombs that we'll be voting on. We don't have enough of those to defend ourselves. But this administration's end could not come quick enough.
Well, yeah, but here's the problem. You're right. Joe Biden can't run a bath. He can't run a country. We've got that figured out. The problem is the person behind him is potentially worse, Ralph, and that's really frightening. I'll real quickly give you the last word. Well,
you're telling the truth. Kamala Harris is a complete buffoon. But look at every member of his cabinet. Look at all the members of the that he's put in office. Look at the judges that he's approved. They're imbeciles. And the fact that it goes down the line, you start impeaching people, you have to impeach the entire cabinet. That's why it's up to the entire administration. That's why it's up to the American people to go to the polls and kick this administration out. Let's get some sanity back in this country that's going to protect our freedom. If we don't, we lose it.
You got that right. Congressman Ralph Norman, South Carolina. I'll bet China has ammunition. Just saying. They
got plenty of it.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. Important stuff. We'll talk again soon. Good luck on the vote tonight.
Thank you.
All right. Up after the break, things are getting, pretty insane out there when it comes to sexuality. Lucas Miles will join me to discuss the mental illness of our day that society is failing to address. It's up next on America's Voice Live. Do you sometimes sit there and think to yourself, gosh, it couldn't get any more insane than it is right now. It couldn't possibly get any dumber. I think that you see a story and you go, well, at least we finally hit bottom. Yeah. Well, just when you thought People couldn't get any crazier. This trans person wants to be the first to receive a uterus transplant in order to get an abortion. You can't make up this kind of sickness. Here it is.
The first trans woman to have a successful uterus transplant, ovaries and eggs included. And I want to be the first trans woman to have an abortion. I will let a doctor who has successfully transplanted a uterine complex before cut the organs out of a willing, healthy, transmasculine donor, place them in my body. I will devote myself, heart and soul, to their aftercare.
Soul? What soul? Just throwing it out there. But I'm going to go ahead and pray that sickos like this are merely seeking attention and they're not. Seriously, I don't think this is not credible. But this is what leftists support. These are the people that the left endorses when they holler, love is love and be inclusive. Inclusive of massive mental illness. This is the work of evil. And I pray to God that people can now clearly see that this push for transgenderism is primarily propaganda team out in full force, countering the narrative of his attempt to erase his 7th grandchild, 4-year-old Navy Joan. She is the illegitimate daughter of Hunter Biden, proven through a DNA test back in 2019. Navy is not even allowed to carry the Biden name, at least thus far, but I don't see how that's possible. You can always name a child after the father. Hunter made news last week when his child support was reportedly lowered more than 75% to a mere $5,000 a month. Dana over at CNN, Dana Mash, had this to say.
This is a story that is sad and disturbing on so many levels. Yes, it is political for a couple of reasons. Number one, yes, Republicans are using it and are going to take advantage of it in a way that is unfortunate and inappropriate. But the reason they are doing that is because, and able to do that, is because of the brand and the kind of person that we all know and believe Joe Biden to be, because it's who he says he is, and it's somebody who is a family man. That's what we see all of the time.
No, you see, Dana, it's because they're dirtbags. Because they won't acknowledge that their son had a child out of wedlock. They are, by definition, dirtbags. Joe Biden's misinformation team continued to convolute the truth as The View blamed Republicans for weaponizing Hunter. Ladies?
What is absolutely evident to me is that the right wing and the MAGA world has decided to weaponize Hunter Biden against his dad.
And what's worse is that Ana Navarro has not been charged yet with impersonating a conservative or impersonating a human being, which should be crimes in most states. Yep, it's the Republicans' fault for the Bidens' failed family values, Anna. And she says she's a Republican? Sure she is. A nonprofit watchdog has filed a complaint against the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force, General Charles Q. Brown, alleging his making hiring decisions based on race and ideology potentially violate the U.S. Constitution. The American Accountability Foundation's complaint argues General Brown's public comments on hiring policies could lead to civil and constitutional rights violations and is urging an investigation into his actions. The foundation points to examples of public discriminatory statements made by Brown that may have already influenced hiring and promotion processes within the Air Force. President Biden, of course, expected to nominate Brown as the next chairman of the Joint Chiefs, replacing General Mark Milley. You know, out of the frying pan. And it is the Air Force. Maybe they're different, but every armed recruit is told first day there's only one color in the Army, OD green, and every soldier bleeds green. Yeah, except now. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit has temporarily that is, reversed a lower court decision allowing Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for children to take effect immediately while awaiting appeal. The lifting of the injunction means the law can be fully enforced, allowing Tennessee authorities to investigate health care providers who violate the ban with fines up to $25,000. Sixth Circuit's decision covers Michigan, Ohio, Tennessee, and Kentucky and marks the first federal decision to ban gender-affirming care for minors. American Civil Liberties Union of Tennessee called the decision, quote, disappointing and heartbreaking. Right, we can't mutilate kids anymore. That's a damn shame. The court stated that it will expedite the appeals process and resolve the case by the 30th of September. Meanwhile, a book that has been removed from schools across the country due to age appropriate. And good to have you back. You know, these things happen. It's live broadcast. From time to time, there's a little snafu in the line. Bear with us. It's all good. Pastor Lucas Miles, he stuck around, which is good because this whole thing about getting a uterus transplant so you can have an abortion, I mean, this person has no soul. Lucas, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you stuck it out, my friend. What do you make of this stuff?
You know, you're right. As soon as you think that we've hit the bottom, surely it can't go any further than this, we get a story like this. This is, I mean, it's really premeditated murder is what it is, that this person is actually, trying to find some sort of, Frankenstein medical way to, put a uterus in himself just so that and use somebody else's eggs and everything else to try to conceive a child just so that he can have it aborted. I mean, first of all, the chances of this are next to zero. But you tell you what, you give the left enough money and enough time, and they will invent new ways of doing evil. And look, I don't put it past people to just to continue to do this kind of if you want to call it science, it's certainly not medicine. Experimental science just for the purpose of inventing new ways to do evil. It's disturbing. It's mentally ill, and this should be condemned by everybody. It won't be, but it really should be.
Well, let me ask you this: you talk about the Frankenstein procedure. You take a uterus from an organ donor, however that works, and transport it into this guy, who then. Okay, we see the obvious problems with him being soulless or black-hearted or whatever, but what about doctors? Do you think doctors would actually do this? Doctors would do the transplant knowing what his intentions were, and then a doctor would do the abortion knowing that all of these things had to transpire, and plus, who pays for all of this? This is massive amounts of money, and you're right. It's premeditated murder. So my question then becomes, who's more evil? The guy who's trying to get in line to make this happen, or any medical professional that would participate in this grotesque procedure?
Look, there's a fine line between mental illness and just pure evil. There's a fine line between mental illness and being demonized. And I think that maybe all apply in these situations. But certainly somebody who would take advantage of somebody who's obviously mentally ill like this. And I thought was weird about the video is that, I haven't heard a lot of people say this, is it looks like he's looking down at notes to kind of read verbatim almost a statement that he has. I thought that was just a bizarre take on this whole thing. But for a doctor to take advantage of somebody like this and to even make that attempt, especially knowing that this person is only doing it so that he could have an abortion, but there's been the John Moneys of the world. There's been the Alfred Kinseys of the world. We've seen some evil, people within the sciences that are really just seeking, personal fame for how far they can push, whatever progressive notion that they have. And look, you give it enough time, and I'm sure that he could find somebody, who's willing to experiment with these things. But it's just the whole thing is disturbing.
Well, and look, we're dealing with this from all directions. The military providing, gender-affirming surgery. Prisons providing gender-affirming surgery. All of this nonsense. And you pay for it, and I pay for it financially. But as a society, we pay for this. Do you think this is going on in other countries that target us? Do you think they're doing this in China and Russia and Iran? And you know the answer. Of course not. They're not practicing pronouns. They're practicing to kill Americans.
Maybe we wouldn't be out of ammunition, for the Ukrainians and this whole thing with Russia if we weren't spending so much money on this sort of nonsense. Maybe our military would actually have what they need to defend this country if we weren't just, if everybody hadn't gone woke and we were spending money like this. So it's robbing the American people. It is taking advantage of people who are mentally ill. It is evil, really demonic sciences.
Can you imagine explaining to George Washington or Abraham Lincoln or Dwight David Eisenhower or whomever, fast forward into the 2020s, these are the conversations we're going to have. We're going to convert men into women so they can kill children before they're born. I mean, these people go, what the hell happened? Honestly. And the answer is the devil happened.
If we don't understand it in this day and age, this is one of those stories. It's like I almost don't even have anything to say, Steve, because it's so disturbing. And, if you read his full quote, you see the full video. It just gets worse about how he wants to run out and, have sex with everybody that he can find to try to make this happen. This guy is deranged. And to think of the founders of this nation, knowing that what they were dying for, what they were, striving to really create was going to turn into this, they would be rolling over there in their graves right now. And so this is one of the ones that you just hope is a Babylon Bee article, and it's not.
But it's not. Lucas, I got to run. Thank you for hanging in there with us. Important stuff, strange stuff, and it won't be the last of it. A lot of darkness out there right now.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
All right, after the break, some stories that remind us of America being wonderful, plus the answers to our America's Voice question of the day. Don't go anywhere. It's ABL. I always take a moment to talk about what makes America wonderful. Usually it comes down to the people. Recently at Tony Hawk's Vert Alert competition in Salt Lake City, Utah, 13-year-old Arissa True made history as the first female skateboarder to land a 720 trick. You want to be impressed? Here it is.
This is the end of the home front. Run it. Everything these athletes have. This is the end of the right hand. We're going to give it all.
A trick made famous by the godfather of skateboarding, Tony Hawk himself. Afterward, the legendary boarder offered the teenager his personal congratulations as the crowd gave Arissa a round of applause. Amazing. She nailed it at just 13. Me, I'd be in the ER with a busted femur. Just saying. All right. Here's your question of the day. No question about that. What did the FBI Director Christopher Wray's inability or unwillingness to answer questions yesterday say to you? Barbara Baker, cover your, backside. They all do it. I could have answered more than him. And no suspects in Cocoon. God help us all. In the cocaine, I think is what she meant. Donna Russell Reitmeyer, cover up. Donna McGrain, he's a corrupt man whom I believe wants the downfall of Americans and the Constitution. Frankie Thrower, I'm so tired of watching them not answering questions and getting away with it. Everyone from top to bottom of this, sorry, unqualified and corrupt liars. Sorry. And Rosecraft says if he says too much, he'll go to jail and be Epsteined. Well, he just might. All right, appreciate it. We're going to leave it there for today. Thank you for bearing with us. As always, we love you guys. Looking forward to your feedback. You can send me notes at stevegruber.com. Love me, hate me, whatever, I can take it. stevegruber.com. Tell me what's going on. Send me a story idea. I'll check it out there. And never miss The Steve Gerber Show to start your day here in Real America's Voice at 6 a.m. Monday through Friday. I will have tomorrow off, so the crew here will take care of you. I'll see you back here on Monday.
Here are some of the headlines we are featuring today from your favorite news outlets at offthepress.com. Air travel has been a mess all year, and it really hit a crisis during the July 4th holiday. And now United CEO has a reason why: global warming. He blamed storms that grounded jets on climate change, but others said United messed up crew scheduling. President Joe Biden isn't worried about his re-election. He's so confident of winning, he told NATO that he'll be back at the annual summit for the next 5 years. Ray Epps is kind of a scandalous figure in the January 6 investigations. And now the guy suspected of being an FBI plant is expected to be charged like hundreds of others for rioting. And yes, there really is a code inside prisons, and Olympic sex scandal doctor Larry Nassar apparently got stabbed for violating it. For stories like these and more updates all day long from your favorite news outlets, go to offthepress.com.